To get to the specifics in the Harris plan. You also have to sit through, frankly, many minutes of a speech from Donald Trump to get to the meat of his proposals, too. He talked in Savannah, Georgia, for example, yesterday for quite some time, and his ideas about specifically the economy and manufacturing were intermixed with various other thoughts that sometimes did feel a bit unrelated, shall we say. I know that you're a Republican. You may think his proposals are actually the winning strategy to go with here in terms of what he'd like to do with taxes and tariffs, for example. But what about the delivery? Does Donald Trump need to put out a book or read a speech from the teleprompter like Kamala Harris did today?
Talking about furniture at length, I think maybe it was lost on some people as to why that was an important part of our economic plan for the future. So I do think that Republicans in Congress need to talk about what they want to be doing for the economy and why they should be, elected to the majority in the Senate, why Speaker Mike Johnson wants to grow his majority in the House. For Donald Trump out there, he's not really looking out for any of those people. He's looking out for number one, and that's a problem for the Republican tickets down ballot because he has shown us that he's not capable of staying on message. The things he is touting is, no taxes on tips. Okay, great. Bringing back manufacturing to the United States, that is super important, but it would be great to hear how he plans to do that. So I think that there would be, again, if he had some members of Congress out there with him, or he was pointing to a bill that perhaps one of them introduced or was planning to introduce, I think coordinating the effort a little bit more would be better for the Republicans. But again, I just don't see that being an option when he does like to have just the full attention and get to say whatever he wants to for 2 hours at a time in any given city he stops in. So I do think that chaotic nature of Donald Trump, yes, it was effective in 2016. Sure, he won, but it hasn't been effective since then. He continues to jeopardize Republicans' ability to win elections.
As we speak right now, Mara, the lawmakers are leaving Washington, flying home, and they are going to be out on the campaign trail with the economy being the number one topic. You mentioned, wishing that Trump would point to specific legislation that Republicans have sponsored. What do you expect to be among the top campaign points? They usually go home with talking points, but what do you expect them, particularly for Republicans, making the case that they should keep majority of the House, that they should win the majority of the Senate? What points will they be making to constituents in the coming weeks?
They have a lot to do in the lame duck session. They have a lot that they can talk about leading up to Election Day, and about, polls show that Republicans are largely trusted on the economy and on safety and security. They can tout their efforts there. They can also talk about what they are going to get accomplished in the lame duck. Between the Farm Bill, they have different budget appropriations packages they need to really firm up and finalize. So they can talk to them about those issues and, again, growing the majority of what they could do should they also get the Senate. The problem being, though, Congress didn't accomplish a whole lot this year. So it's going to be tough to point to, here's legislation that we got through and it was done on this level. That one's going to be tough to do. I do think that Speaker Mike Johnson is doing the best he can and trying to balance out the Trump wing with also the realization that he is the Speaker of the entire House, the whole House, and has to protect the integrity of the institution.
All right, hold that thought. Maura and Alvin will be back with us. We're going to talk more about Congress with this ongoing. Back with us now for final thoughts, our political panel, Alvin Jordan and Maura Gillespie. Maura, of course, you were just talking about this notion of Congress not having much to show for itself as it heads home for the final stretch of the campaign season. For Mike Johnson in particular, having failed at Plan A to get a 6-month continuing resolution with the SAVE Act attached, having to go for Plan B, despite what Donald Trump might have wanted him to do. When he returns to the House, potentially as someone who will be facing with being a leader in a minority come January, not the majority, depending on the outcome of the election, how do you think he's feeling about his job security right now?
Right now, I would say that it's probably in question. I don't think that if the Republicans, if they lose the House, I don't see Speaker Mike Johnson retaining his position in leadership. I just don't see that happening. I think that the louder voices are going to prevail. And at this point, maybe they should. Maybe if they really think that Jim Jordan can do a better job, by all means. I just think that's it's not a realistic way, because Jim Jordan doesn't have a good relationship across the aisle, and you need somebody who's at least willing to do the right things for the right reasons to get things done. And I think what Speaker Johnson was doing was appeasing Trump and trying to avoid his continued urges for a government shutdown, which Trump was doing. Knowing that that's a problem, he tried to appease him. It did not work, and we all knew this is going to end in a continued resolution as we're dealing with now. And I think that if the Republicans can win the House or keep the House, grow the majority by at least a few members, then maybe it's a different conversation. But I don't see him retaining his gavel if they lose, or his position in leadership, I should say.
Alvin, when we talk about Speaker Johnson, whether he retains his position or not, and potentially Jim Jordan or Tom Emmer taking his place, be it in the majority or the minority next year, Johnson has, and he's been dinged for this, particularly by his right flank, negotiated with Democrats. Whether Democrats are in the majority or the minority in the House, how would negotiations go with a Jim Jordan or a Tom Emmer?
Well, I think to Mara's point, we can kind of take a peek and see that if those relationships aren't so tight that we get, a lot of what we've experienced now, maybe not to this extreme, but I think that, just as we were talking off camera, in a session that has been filled with, a lot of nothing or a lot of emptiness, I don't think more divisiveness is the recipe for, pulling together, more green lights, as it were. And so in that way, you kind of look at, maybe some fresh voices that, could maybe help move the needle a bit more.
All right, Alvin Jordan and Maura Gillespie, our political panel this evening. Thank you both so much for joining us. And thanks to Megan Scully for joining me.